Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons & Dragons and discuss how we might include them in our role-playing campaigns. With me this week, I have an absolutely incredible special guest, the first time on this podcast. A special guest, can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Oh my god, I'm a special guest?
Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Shaghik, or Shaghik, if you want to cop out and say it in a sort of easier way. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a sound designer, or audio engineer, or a glorified audio editor, whatever you want to call it, also video editor. Also, I do some actual play performing, and other things, a lot of other things.
Yeah. We met very recently in a part of the One Shot Patreon drive. You claimed that you didn't have too much in terms of TTRPG knowledge, and that is true to a certain extent. But I think you've got a lot of knowledge about lots of other things because you do lots of editing for lots of TTRPG podcasts. Is that right?
Sort of. So I am just now getting into doing a bunch of editing for a bunch of different TTRPG podcasts, and I have myself made an actual play RPG podcast in the past, but my knowledge mostly comes from playing. It's just, when you compare to the layman, the average person, sure, I'm a nerd. I know so much about TTRPGs, but let's remember who I was comparing myself to during that stream.
I mean, you were at a big disadvantage about having Sistery Mastery and James D'Amato, even though James was on your team.
Yeah, so I don't know if that counts as disadvantage, but yes.
I don't know.
So, and I'm way younger than them. Like, when I wasn't even speaking English that well, they were already doing TTRPG podcasts probably, so very much a disadvantage, but I'm happy with how I did.
So you were talking about your actual plays, and obviously you said yourself you've done some actual play stuff and an actual play podcast. So how did you get started in RPGs? Are you mostly a player? Are you a DM yourself?
So obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but D&D was the first game I played. And this was in 2017, I think. A friend of mine was like, hey, you've been saying that you want to play D&D. I've got a friend. I had one session. That friend then went off, left the country, whatever it was. And then a year later, they came back and we had a second session of that game.
Hope there wasn't a cliffhanger or something.
Right?
You're like, we'll never know.
That was the 2 sessions I had until I actually properly got into it. And my third year of university, when now a friend of mine who was a freshman at the time started a club, D&D club. And at first I thought I would be a player because I knew so little about how to play. Again, I had 2 sessions and I really didn't even know the rules very well. I didn't even know how to roll, how to do combat, anything at all. But because there were so many people that signed up to the club and he was the only DM, frankly, well, besides like him, I was the only other person who had even played or played the game at all. So I was like, you know what? I'll help you out and I'll jump into it. Best way to learn. I did it. I DM'd my first campaign was the first campaign I ever DM'd. So
wow, holy heck.
I know. It was bad, Fiona.
Hey, of course it was. I'm not going to be there going like, it was amazing. I'm like, no, because you're learning at the same time. But that's still, like, a lot of people don't even get to do that. Like, you were 2 sessions going, sod it, I'll do it. And so, you know, that not many people will do that. Not many people are confident to do that. And you were just like, oh, fine. And here you are now, you know?
I guess I have to do it myself.
Yes.
No, it was wonderful. I'm very grateful for my friend who, like, sat literally there, like, just shadowed me for the first however many sessions as he taught me things and I asked him things and whatever. But yeah, like every NPC had the same personality. Like I couldn't come up with anything but John for their names for a while.
Works fine.
Let me tell you. So I was doing Phandalin. I was doing
right, the starter set sort of thing.
Yeah. And this campaign lasted 6 months. Miraculously, people actually like stayed and stuck around, and we finished the campaign. 1 or 2 people left, and 1 person like joined at some point. But most people like stayed, and we finished the campaign, even though it was so bad at times. I was running the campaign, and I was reading the module as I was running it. I didn't even read it from start to end.
You just did it. Each chapter, you're like, oh, that's what's happening. Okay, interesting.
There were sessions where I was reading what I was DMing for the first time as I was doing it. It was so bad.
I don't. You say bad. Like I can imagine it being scary, but if people keep coming back session after that, and then you finish the campaign, that's good.
Well, didn't really had many other options for who.
Oh, you're doing yourself
played
down. They could have they could have easily done it themselves. That's the thing, right? They do have an option. I think that shows testament that's for people who just go and just do it, and it doesn't matter how good or bad it is. We're not going to be Matt Mercer or Brennan Lee Mulligan or any of these folks at the beginning.
For yourself.
Sorry. You are now. You are now, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You do one campaign and you're done.
Spoke too soon. You said at the beginning.
You said you did an actual play podcast as well. Was that sort of another transition, a part of this sort of journey for you DMing?
Yeah, so I did that campaign, and then for, I'd say, maybe about a year or so after that, I continued just playing in one-shots here and there, small campaigns, whatever, until a friend of mine on like a Discord server was like, hey, I want to start an actual play podcast. Who wants it? And I'm like, yes, me. I'll do it because I'll say yes to anything. But also, it just felt like such a oh my god, yes, I want to do this so bad. And then it just sort of happened. It was a horror podcast. We used Heart: The City Beneath as the system. We did like a season and a half until everybody burned out. I was the last man standing, and then I burned out.
Always the way.
Yeah, and it was amazing, though. I'm so proud of the show to this day. We had a Patreon with everything. It was proper, an actual thing.
Show, yeah, absolutely.
We had great art. One of our people was the artist. She made great posters for every season.
Oh, wow.
And one of the other people was a composer, so he made amazing tracks for both seasons as well.
And so that's interesting that you went from D&D, running it, and then to Heart, which is very, very different. Obviously, dungeon delving to an extent, but also body horror, different system and all that sort of thing. Do you have a particular favourite genre yourself in terms of games you like to run or play?
Obviously, I have a soft spot for horror. I don't know if I did at the time, but very quickly it became so, especially psychological, mindfuckery, which is what I called it. What we frequently called it as a sort of running gag kind of thing during the show. But yeah, I just really like scaring people.
But that's the thing about horror. I mean, we could talk about this on a different podcast about how I think everyone should play a horror game and everyone should run a horror game because it just tells you so much about story and narrative. So that's really interesting. Do you have a particular favourite RPG system then? Because I know, like you said, you've started off with D&D, as most people do nowadays. But is there one that's, again, I assume that you will probably have home games just now, or you playing in different games or running different games, but do you have a system that you like going back to at all?
Yes and no. I mean, Heart, which is the system we used for the podcast, kind of, not to be, one-trick pony, to be repeating the same thing, but I love that system so much. I do keep going back to it. However, also I'm trying to branch out and not just stick to one thing. I'm trying to actually play other Rowan Rook and Deckard games. Maybe even play Spire, which is hand in hand with Heart.
It's worth checking out because Heart was seen as one of the best RPGs of last year. It had a sort of soft launch, and then it's come back because they've done other editions and stuff like that. So it is quite in the zeitgeist just now.
I love it.
You're right. So Spire was their predecessor, which is that idea of a dread sort of neo noir political intrigue, and then Heart is what is that? But actually underneath in a horrible hallucinative
radioactive
dungeon
space,
that it's annihilation. It's all these things going into one. And it's so interesting because there's such different genres, but they're connected to the same thing. So you could have a character go through the whole thing.
Yeah, because the Spire has all the political intrigue, and the Heart is where people run to, whether to start a new life, whether because they're refugees, or because they were the oppressors and they, for whatever reason, ran away, started new. Maybe they, were traitors. Who knows what it is? The Heart is such an equalizer, and everybody flees there and starts this new life where your past just doesn't matter because everyone's equally likely to die. And then the deeper you go, then the laws of time and space and physics and anything just start to crumble more and more. And that's the kind of shit I adore. I love it.
Yeah, we really recommend any sort of Rowan Rook and Descartes stuff because it has beautiful artwork, really well designed world building as well. And like you said, like you could literally, I like that you could go from you could start from either place and go and visit these two places, and there'll be changes a little bit, but the system is still the same. Yeah, and they're connected. But of course, that is not what we're talking about today. We'll move away from Heart. We'll shut that door for another time.
I could talk about Heart for hours.
What are we talking about today? What is our topic of choice?
The topic of choice for today is Artisan's tools, which is one of my favorite parts of D&D.
Interesting. So tools, from what I know from looking at it like previously, it was just something that was like a little extra thing at the end of my character sheet. And I go, oh, I guess I've got Mason's tools. And that was it. I never engaged with it in any way. So what is it about tools in general, so artisan tools, that you really like? And was it something that, was that something that's always part of your campaign, or just something that sort of sparked your imagination? Yeah, I'm just really interested. Why tools?
I'm not entirely sure. It's just whenever I looked at the list, for example, Cartographer's tools is the one that I always go back to, is just liking the idea that, well, every D&D character, everybody in the party can have their different strengths, and this is just another thing that can add to that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, why wouldn't I love it? It's there to use, and like, I think, like you said it just right, which is that for most people, from my understanding is for most people, this is such a like afterthought. They are the tools than the artisan's tools. It just seems like, oh, they can provide a bit of role play, but not much more. But for me, it's just another aspect of mixing role play and mechanics that I love doing. It's just an ideal game for me, really hits that balance and connects, intertwines roleplay and mechanics perfectly, and Artisan's tools are really like such a great example of that.
Because it struck me as interesting, because I guess the only tools I know that are used fairly regularly would be thieves' tools for like unlocking things, all that sort of thing. But then when I was looking down the list of stuff, like you said, cartographer's tools, obviously like musical instruments, all that sort of thing.
Weaver's tools,
like all these tools, you look at them and I think to myself, God, when will I ever use these in a situation? But then you go back to creative role players who will go down from everything going, all right, the last thing I have is, my Weaver's tools. Can I do anything with them? And I was like, oh, actually, that it is something that I remember, again, campaigns long ago where I go, okay, I've got Mason's tools. Can I hammer something out of, can I carve stuff, but it was like something that didn't necessarily, I was like, is this a last resort for me as a player looking at the character sheet going over 2 or 3 pages? But then you were sort of talking about like the, both several things that we were going to talk about today. It was like the Dumpstat Adventures sort of blog, creating their own, like, 38 different kinds of tools, or like expanding upon them. And then the recent update in the 2024 rules talking about like getting these crafting tools, and that they're not just like a line that you have in your character sheet anymore. You can actually get stuff from them. So I just thought those, again, I'd never really considered, oh yeah, what's the consequence of using this tool and then getting a product out of them,
When I was going through the 2024 handbook and I saw this new additions to the Artisan's tools and the other tools, and I thought, oh, let me go check what the 5e had. And I found one paragraph about all of the Artisan's tools.
Yeah.
Half of which completely pointless. Yeah. I think maybe I should pull it out, but it just says something like the equivalent of like, having a proficiency with these tools gives you proficiency with ability checks related to checks to do with these rules, or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, duh.
Obviously. And it's just a list of tools that it might have a few bits and pieces in them, but it doesn't really inspire you. Like, I was like I said, like the Mason's tools, I was like, what the heck's in Mason's tools? Is it just like, I was like, what do you have? Do you have gloves? I don't know. So it's interesting that there wasn't any detail on it. And I would say like with the new version, the 2024 version, there is more detail on it. It's not as detailed as the Dumpstat Adventure blog, which again, we'll go into in a bit more detail. But it was just interesting how like, even back then in 2014, tools weren't seen as it's just add something to your proficiency, and didn't go into any detail because it's like they didn't think it was important.
Just a bit of flavor, Like Xanathar's does expand on the tools a little bit, which actually the 2024 handbook did pull quite a bit of it from Xanathar's, but it's still a little bit janky, and you can really tell that the writers just didn't know what to do with some of these tools. Dumpstat does definitely make a great improvement on a lot of them. Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting to look at and compare all of them together.
Just to clarify for people, so Dumpster Adventures is a big sort of blog that does lots of different sort of homebrew stuff, and there, Stephen Banstra, I believe the author is called, has created a whole book purely on tools and has expanded them and gone into lots of detail from them, and you can get them for free. You can send some money to the Patreon or buy the full book itself, and so we're going to look at a couple of them today and just talk about them, and also talk about what's the new updates as well, because I think this is the thing. I think for players, they will find it really interesting to have so much detail about what their tools can do. For GMs, I can imagine them going, ugh, what can your tools do? So I can see both sides of it. I was like, cool, you get to do the cool thing, etc. But I think what was interesting is that if you're passionate about your character having, say, fishing tackle, that character is going to be used fishing as a downtime activity. They're going to get stuff for it, and it's just interesting. I was like, oh yeah, why can't they use that? Why can't they use their tools and get this advantage? Because it, as you were saying, it's another aspect of their personality. It's something that they are good at. That's not necessarily magic or fighting,
I think a big reason why in all of the games I've been in, I've always wanted to use these artisans tools more, wanted them to be more relevant, more useful, but the DM never really thought about it, was because the book really discourages you giving a shit about them a little bit, besides, again, a little bit of flavor. So I always felt like I had to negotiate and haggle with my DM to be able to use tools in an actually mechanically properly useful way. And even if 5.5e or Xanathars doesn't do a perfect job of making them completely useful, I think adding some mechanical value to them just shows proof to the DMs that it's not OP if I use my cartographer's tools to make a map and navigate. Well, please let me do this.
That's so true as well, because not only that, again, that's a great example. Okay, well, I've got cartographer's tools. I want to make a map of the local area, and then we can or study stuff, and then we can use it for a later check. It gives the consequence of using that action to the players as well. Like I said, I know I keep going back to Mason's tools, but I was there going when will I ever use Mason tools, and what do I use them for? But then using the system of well, you can have a small statue that you could sell later on, or anything like that. I go, oh, these are the options open to me as the player as a result.
In a campaign I just finished playing, my character had proficiency with woodcarver's tools, and at some point, I was a thief, but also our party just was such a fucking party of entrepreneurs who were constantly selling stuff and haggling and starting new businesses and whatever. But basically, at some point, I started making these tiaras, wooden crowns and tiaras, and constantly selling them, adding some gems to them, just in the downtime, just a side hustle that I got a bit of extra money from. And by bit, I mean, it was a decent amount of money that I made from that. Especially because I cast Distort Value on each and every one of them.
Oh, amazing.
When I was selling them.
I love that spell from the Acquisitions Incorporated book. It's such great.
Can I tell you, my DM, he has a very, a principle of not changing rules halfway through a kid game, but he said very early on in the campaign, I am never allowing Distort Value in a game ever again.
No, but it's great. Oh, boo.
Oh my god.
Taking that example of the woodcarver's tool, so in the 2024, it talks about, first of all, what skill is it sort of associated with? So woodcarver's tools, for example, that ability is dexterity. So it'll be a dexterity check, and if you're using it with the tools, again, you just add your proficiency while using that as well. So just bouncing it up. And to utilize, what action would you normally do, that sort of main action? It says here to carve a pattern in the wood, and the DC is 10. The fact that adding just a DC, again, just helps the GM going sure, you can type it, whatever. And it could be, are you doing something decorative? Are you maybe doing some sort of graffiti in the forest? Or I don't know.
Yeah, it just sort of gives legitimacy to the fact that these can be mechanically useful. And then if you just say that something can have you can do something and it have a DC and actually affect, well, mechanically, I keep repeating myself, but that can just be enough of a jumping off point for the DM to think, well, okay, well, if they're actually supposed to be useful, the book tells us that they're supposed to be useful, then let's think about, because, Mason's tools, sure, they might be really rare in a normal, typical campaign, but, what if I'm having a campaign of Masons?
Yeah.
And I want a bit more mechanics, you know.
I like that, like, because obviously we always joke about like, oh, oops, all bards, oops, all druids, but what about oops, all some sort of crafter background? What if everyone's from the art?
Oops, all calligraphers.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Why not? And then on the sort of the final bit of each sort of entry, it talks about stuff that you can craft. Obviously, crafting has been a part of D&D for as well, and I know there was a bit of hype around getting the 2024 like crafting system out. But here it just talks about like for the woodcarver's tools, you can create all manner of weapons as well. It doesn't say anything of value like you were talking about. But I like the fact you've got all these options, and you go, I guess I can create anything that's using woodcarver's tools. Maybe I can create wooden crowns and stuff like that. So I was just like, oh, that's really interesting. I did just look at the mason tools though, and they can only craft a block and tackle, which is I was like, okay, less good perhaps. So maybe I won't be using my mason's tools. But like I'm like, oh, I didn't know I could craft that with my mason's tools, you know.
Basically, I think what we wanted to do is we've got like 3 tools each, and we want to go through them. And you actually picked tools that Dumpstat created themselves, if I understand correctly.
The reason I did that was because I think what I really liked about the 2024 stuff is that this was, for me, my level of like, oh, yes, as a player, and this is me going, I should use my tools more often. And then I looked at Dumpstat's sort of all of the stuff, and I was like, oh, wow, they've got tools that aren't in the 2024 book. And also stuff that I'm like, oh, what if a player did want to use these? And these are very, very detailed. And like they've gone into a lot of detail about like what you can get from them. So I went for 3 that weren't a part of it, but I feel like are a part of any gaming world that could be. So I went for the Corpse Stitch kit, because obviously I do like horror as well. Mm-hmm. The Gemologist supplies, so something to do with gems, and then fishing tackle, because as try as I might, fishing is a part of every bloody game I've ever been in. So
yes. And as it should be.
As it should be. And it is interesting, I promise. It's not just a boring fishing simulator. But that's the 3 I sort of went for, just to try them out. Because you were also picking some ones as well, weren't you?
So I decided to go for 3 that were already in the D&D original playbook that they expanded upon. And the 3 I picked were cartographer's tools.
Your favourite?
Oh, shocker. The forgery kit, and also glass blowers tools.
Yeah.
Because that is one I find one of the tools that they, again, like I said before, can't figure out what the hell to do with it. It's very funny to me.
Looking at the 2024 glass blowers tools, the utilized action is discern what a glass object held in the past 24 hours, DC 15. I'm like, do you just look at a vase and go, ah, yes, roses? Like, I don't know. Like,
what does that mean? I was going through the handbook and I died when I read that. What does that mean? So this was actually taken from Xanathar's, and it says that, like, for example, I guess if there was a healing potion in the glass bottle or whatever, maybe the potion somehow changed the texture of the glass or whatever. And like, okay, fine, but anything that's been in a glass container you can figure out.
Yeah, it feels like very pedantic, very like CSI. Reaching. You know, where you test it. You know, you get your tongue out. You go, yes, sherbet. I don't know. Like it's like, I feel that is a wild utilization. Like I don't know why they couldn't just be like, well, you create glass sculptures to sell. I don't know why that's...
Bless them, honestly. It's just like, I could see them sitting there at the writer's room being like, what the fuck are we going to do with the glass blowers tools? It's the fun fact. If you go down the list, I don't remember which other tools it is, but the same exact utilized thing, but not for glass, but like metal or maybe like pottery.
Yeah, potter's tools. Discern what ceramic object held in the past 24 hours. Ah, yes, tea. Like, I don't know.
That one, I can see like 1% more. Maybe.
Did it hold like, yes, some maybe a treasure in it? I think if you got a glass object, you probably don't put treasure or like anything important in it because it will...
Unless you really want to flex.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, look at this like golden medal that's in a little like glass like vase on the shelf. Haha. Yeah. Again, I think you're right. I think there's a little bit of a struggle to be like, what could you use this for? And then because then they go into like, well, you can craft them. So again, that glass blowers was, glass bottle, magnifying glass, etc. The potter's tools is a jug or a lamp. Classic things you'll always want to craft. Then the Dumpstat stuff, they go into a lot more detail about like what it is to create something, what materials you will need, and what the results are for all these things. And it is very specific to each one. So like for the fishing tackle one, for example, I've learned so much about lines and lures and rods. But again, all of them make sense to me. It's like, okay, if you've got a big fish, you're trying to attract big fish, then you want to have a certain kind of rod. Otherwise, it's going to snap and then you're going to cost money. And so it totally breaks it down in a very normal way to, again, for people to maybe gamify the system a little bit. Like, okay, we want to get these fish for, I don't know, supper, or you want to get them for a magic spell or something like that. It goes, okay, in my downtime, I do this for 8 hours. So yeah, I think Dubstep does this really good thing of like, it makes it sort of expanding on stuff, but in not so much. I mean, sometimes you look at it, I can imagine like a person who doesn't play D&D or video games going, why do you need to know all this information? But actually,
this is not beginner stuff. No,
yeah.
You don't need to use this when you're doing your first ever game unless you really, really want to. But
yeah, exactly. And but I think, like I said, it is like, I feel like the 2024 stuff that we're looking at, we're like, okay, this is definitely a big improvement. But then, yeah, glass blowers. So what? Like pottery. So what? Why would I go for these particular tools? And so I think it's leaving that wiggle room for people to then go, right, let's make our own thing. So it's opened up a world to me that I had not really considered about like tools and crafting. Because I'll put it this way. I'm not a big Minecraft person. I find that sort of stuff really intense. No, I can imagine. but it gets people going, oh, well, I can create these things and these will help me get advantage. And it's not just like, oh, I'm strong, I'm physically strong, or I'm super dexterous. It's just like, I have played with lockpicks all of my life because that's what I enjoy. I'm not a thief or anything, but now I've got thieves tools and I can do this in my spare time because it's something that I fiddle with. So,
Yeah. Going back to the glass blowers tools, and then so we're sort of doing a back and forth on.
Hey, all good.
As I said, I looked at Xanathar's guide as well as 5e and the 2024 handbook. So there's absolutely nothing to go off of except for like price and weight in the 2014 handbook. And the 2024 handbook just takes a bit of stuff from Xanathar's guide, which has a bit more. So besides the utilize action, which is like figure out what this object held hilariously, but it also has like, it's so strange. Basically, Xanathar's guide, how it formatted all the different tools is it listed some of the skills that you could use with these objects, with these tools. So it says like Arcana and History, having... I'm not entirely... It was a bit confusing. I didn't read the whole section. I just read the bits of the tools that I needed. So I was a bit confused, but I think it's saying that if you have, for example, a proficiency with Arcana or History, or you're rolling with Arcana or History, then, and the glassblower's tools, you would be better... It said something about like you're gonna be better at examining glass objects. It was very, again, reachy. Some of the other tools on the Xanathar's guide do a better job, but glassblowers, again, I really like felt the struggle of the writers as I was reading through these. For investigation, for example, it says that, quote, your knowledge can aid you if the clues are broken glass or glass objects, which just feels silly. Like, I literally have in my notes, I've written, fuck off.
I think, yeah, it's tricky because, like, again, I'm trying to think of glass stuff. It's like, oh, I think of, okay, it's fragile, probably very precious, probably takes a lot of skill to make something. And so in my head, I would always be investigating, like, glass sculptures or broken windows. And that's the sort of thing, like, but glass blowing itself is quite a skill. Like, you are making like stuff, like it's like you know how to make things. So if anything, you'd be like, well, I know how to replace the glass vase I broke. That's the only thing I could think of. You know, like it's not like it is about more crafting stuff.
The most mechanically actually useful thing that Xanathar's guide tells us about glass blowers is that you can spend 1 minute examining a glass object and then identify its weak points, and then if you hit those weak points, it does double damage. So
nice.
Something the Dumpstat blog, because they have a blog of like explaining their thought process behind developing all of these PDFs and the stat blocks for all the tools. Something they said that was very funny is, yes, a whole minute during which one of the other players could have come and just smashed it
the
to
window,
bits.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the thought behind it, but maybe you're thinking of, I don't know, a glass floor, or it's like maybe you're patrolling and like, staking out a building and stuff like that. But you're right. It's like, give me something, give me a round, you know?
In a very specific situation, it would work. So if like you only had one hit that you could do, or I don't know, whatever else. I do, regardless of like making fun of it, I do appreciate that there was some mechanical value added because again, even if it's silly, even if it's figure out what this glass object held in the past 24 hours, it's still kind of fun that, like, yeah, there's actual mechanical use and I don't have to DIY, I don't have to homebrew any sort of purpose to these tools, even if it's ridiculous.
I think, and also, again, this is just me thinking, I don't know, I'm not a CSI person or anything like that, but there's like, you can identify, like, oh, there are fingerprints on said glass. I don't know, or you could work out like how it was held or something like that, like if it's a poison chalice and was there multiple people holding it, all that sort of thing. I wonder if it's just that sort of thing, like what about on the outside of it? Was there something missing? And yeah, I think the construction of glass is just always interesting because that's what glass blowers are all about. And I can't remember the name of the show, but there's Netflix shows that's like a reality TV show where there's all these glass blowers making amazing objects, and so I know how difficult it is. So it would make me laugh that any of those folks who make amazing art come and go, oh yes, this held air than the last 24 hours. It's
I feel like I'm spending so much time on just one tool, but I really found what Dumpstat did with the glassblowers tool quite interesting.
Yeah, so what did they do?
Had so much to talk about. So first of all, they made it so you can't just willy-nilly wherever make glass objects. You had to find a furnace that was hot enough, because they said, so they did the math and they did the research, which I'm very grateful for. And in the blog post, it said that you need a campfire gets about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit hot. I use Celsius, but I haven't Googled what that is, Celsius. So whatever. And you need about 2,300 Fahrenheit, to do any sort of glass blowing, right? I think if I was doing it in my game, I would bend the rules of reality a little bit so people, because like so much of D&D is you traveling.
Yes.
So I think I would like either just be like, you can use a campfire, or at the very least, maybe I'd make some sort of magic item available to them, something expensive that could make the campfire hotter, or be a source of heat itself, or some sort of thing, right?
Having some sort of like, like a Mordenkainen's Marvelous Mansion that has a forge in it or something like that, like something that they can bring with them, but it will take the full half a rest to set it all up and then make something.
Sure,
using their downtime for it, for sure.
Because then it just makes things like, technically the glassblower tools can be useful, but really not. And the other really good thing, the really like smart way of how they made the glassblower tools actually like useful is, like you said, you can make objects with them, you can make weapons with them, and you can make armor with them. They are single use,
of course,
but what they did that was really interesting is they borrowed a mechanic from previous editions called bleed, which meant, for example, if they made like a glass dart and they shot the dart hit, it exploded inside the person, and it like at the start of every turn they kept getting damage because of like the bits of glass in them.
Nice.
And they had like a bunch of different types of weapons, like arrowheads, just normal arrows, darts, crossbow darts, etc., right? So all of those. And they had another one, they had a glass shirt, which is like armor, and if somebody hits it, it explodes, and then it's sort of an ice knife situation but with glass.
I love that.
So I thought that was really cool.
I really like that because, again, I'm thinking back to one of the Dimension 20 series, Never After. They had various princesses in different armor, and one of the princesses, I think it was like Sleeping Beauty or something like that, or Snow White, she had an armor made out of glass.
Wouldn't it be Cinderella?
It was Cinderella. You're right. It is Cinderella, I think. Yeah,
because
it
of
is.
The glass shoe.
The glass shoe. Yes, that was it. So she had like a complete glass armor, but she was invisible. And so I like that idea of making like a glass armor, but being invisible, like, or having the light shine off you, causing disadvantage and stuff like that. So again, manipulating it a little bit. Like you said, it is a double-edged sword at the ice knife thing, because you will get damaged as well. But I love that idea that you are almost like a ticking time bomb, essentially. As soon as you're hit, it's going to explode out at this sort of big force. Yeah, I really like that idea. But I can imagine it takes a long time to put all that stuff together. And again, it's that sort of thing where it depends on your campaign. If it's a lot of traveling, like you said, in the wilderness, maybe they're not going to be able to make a full suit of armor because they're going to have resources and all that sort of thing. Whereas if they spend a week in a town and use the blacksmithing, the forge there, then maybe so. But I like that idea that you make these things and go, okay, now I can imbue them with magic. Now I can do this and make it really personal and really tailor it to your players. go next, and I'll talk a little bit about the corpse stitching kit. Obviously, this is Halloween themed, naturally, and it is deeply inspired by Frankenstein. And to be fair, I do think this is a little bit inspired, or taking inspiration from, say, the Artificer in creating like a Still Defender, or making a homunculus, anything like that. But it's basically stitching together your best buddy who might have died in the last week or so, but getting another, like, again, it's another sort of familiar under your control who can't necessarily speak, but you can empower them to do stuff. And so what it sort of plays upon with the dump stat stuff is that your, I think it's your proficiency. Let me just double check this. So you're attempting to craft something. It's called the Crafted. This sort of creature that you're making is called the Crafted, which I quite like. And they have a number of necro points that you have to spend in order to create it. The more necro points you spend, sort of the bigger, the more hit points it will have, the more abilities you can have it with. You can choose to have it a couple of weaknesses to increase those necro points. And the way you get necro points is that it's equal to your intelligence modifier plus your proficiency bonus. So obviously, the longer you're in the campaign for, obviously the sort of like more proficient you come in with creating stuff. You can't. It's a bit like a construct in a way. You can't necessarily heal it easily. There's a lot of sewing involved, a lot of that sort of motif going through. Again, if you think about like Edward Scissorhands or anything like that, you could really flavour this crafted this creature and being something that you care for. I will say there is a bit in it where it goes, if you want to create another one, you have to destroy the first. And I'm just like, yeah. I was like, ooh, I don't know about that myself.
Oh.
But I can imagine like you flavour it to be like you carry on creating and making it better, and then just replacing it. You don't actually kill your crafted your baby project, because that felt really harsh because of stuff. But like you said about the glass blower stuff, it suggests that you go into a place that you can have some uninterrupted time. A lot of buildings maybe sort of look down on this sort of stuff, but if you keep quiet about it and find like a lab somewhere where you can store body parts and stuff like that.
And then that adds to the world building of like, what is this place? Who goes there? Who created it? Who runs it?
Yeah, exactly. This is the sort of thing I can imagine you would use in like a Barovian setting or any of the domains of dread. I felt like a lot of the stuff, like in terms of crafted abilities that you can get, you can get them very tough. They can see in the dark. And a lot of the abilities would come from having certain requisites. So, for example, if you wanted them to have fire resistance or lightning resistance, you would have to get, I think, let's say fire resistance is any humanoid with fire resistance, such as tieflings. So maybe having the torso of a tiefling or something like that. Lightning is any humanoid that could cast lightning bolt at least once per day and would have had the spell prepared. So maybe you're just waiting.
Like the hands of a
wizard or something. Yeah, exactly. The only sort of thing I found was interesting is that it does take a lot out of you. So you have to spend, I think it's like for if you've got 5 necro points to spend to create a character, to create a craft of 5 necro points, you have to spend at least 2 days putting it together. And obviously the more complicated the creature is, the more time you have to spend on with it making these checks. And if you fail the checks, the body parts are disintegrated. They can't be used again. So it is quite a high risk, high reward. There's like different levels as well. Like if you manage to just pass the test, fantastic, you get the crafted. If you manage to pass it by 5 or more, it is a masterpiece. So it has a little bit more extra in it. Maybe it's more hidden. It's a bit more like, it's not just like the old-fashioned Frankenstein hammer horror. It is more like a very beautiful Frankenstein. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I love that idea that you can do these things, and it feels very mechanical. But at the same time, you can't have more than one. Like I said, you'd have to destroy your creation and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot in there that you can really, like in terms of story-wise, going back to the abilities, like long reach is that the corpse requirement is having a bugbear, because obviously they've got huge arms. So you could really piece together like almost a monstrosity, so to speak. Now, obviously, the morals of gaining such body parts, we'll leave it up to your players. But it made me think about like, if this was a game, if this was an NPC, like it's not just like, oh, it is just a humanoid body with a face of a different person stitched together. It is actually half a tiefling. There's a gnome. There's a bugbear. There's like all these creatures in. And I see it as a way to sort of open up, and you use all the kinds of lineages, monstrous or not, and just play with that sort of monstrous sort of concept about, so just that I just thought it was really, really interesting.
Going back to what you said about how you can only create one, and then if you want to create another, you have to destroy the first one. I think I definitely allow for maybe throughout a long period of time, and I don't know how many levels they would need to level up, whatever, but I definitely would allow some sort of progression on that where they would be able to eventually make a second one or something. Maybe that takes a toll on them. Maybe some of their life force gets sucked away or something. this is sort of related, but one thing that I always try to do is learn and fail every time because my DMs never actually like remember about it and take into account. But I love, in theory, having my characters learn a language during the campaign because I just don't like the idea that all of that knowledge came in the backstory, and then the second you start the campaign, except for like mechanical like leveling up and stuff, your personality, well, not personality, your like knowledge as a person and stuff stops. This is who you are now. This is you the rest of the time. I mean, that's kind of an oversimplification, not really the case, especially if you add like modifiers to your intelligence and stuff. But my point is, I love the idea of learning languages during a campaign, even if it takes a really, really, really long time, which naturally. Similar to that, I just, I like really long campaigns because they allow for those progressions where something that maybe the mechanics don't allow you to do with time.
Yeah, it allows you to develop a character that feels real. Like you said, like if it's learning a language, if it's building a better crafted, you learn from these things. I will say I just spotted another ability which is called split crafted.
Ooh.
I don't think it's a good idea, but I feel like it's an interesting concept. But basically with that, you have unlocked the secrets of creating and maintaining multiple crafted. So this is what we sort of talked about. But they must be made from those who were once linked in life. So you create two instead of one, but the corpse requirement is any humanoid twins. And then you could go, but what about triplets or quadruplets and all that sort of thing? So again, a very interesting idea.
Yeah. So now you've got like a necromancer who's in search of these
twins.
10, 20-uplets that were born once that you heard about.
Exactly. But I think the only thing I would say with this is that I'm not a big fan of I understand the sort of the trope of, as we sort of said, destroying and then recreating and stuff like that. I feel like I would like something like the split crafted one, for example. I think that's interesting, but it feels like that's not something I'm going to be able to unlock straight away. So I don't know whether that should be like a leveling up thing. Like, hey, you've got really good at creating creatures, but now you get this advanced feature. Like a leveling up of yourself with these tools. You see what I mean?
I would say that I would take into account they have to say that they're spending a certain amount of time every day or every few days or whatever working at it, examining it, studying the craft, etc. Maybe they have to try to create a new one and fail a couple times. Try to create a new one while the first one doesn't die, etc. So it's instead of just playing okay, you're level 4 now, you know this. They have to actually say that spend time working at it more so than anything.
That is fair. Yeah, I forgot it's not just a one and done thing. It is 8 hours in a lab, and then you might even fail those rolls. So then that day has been wasted and stuff. So yeah,
exactly.
What about your next tool that you've picked?
Going back to cartographer's tools. Just like we said, 5.D gives absolutely nothing, just price and weight. Xanathar's guide gives a little bit more, but again, it's really, really vague. It lists some of the skills you have. For Arcana, History, and Religion, it says that you can get more information and more specific information from a map if you use these skills. So maybe if a map has certain signs that are religion related, you would figure, etc. Right? But again, it's a bit vague. And with nature, this one, I've got a big question mark next to my notes. It says something about how it's easier to answer questions or solve issues related to the terrain around you, which is a bit confusing. I'm like, what exactly does that mean?
I will say I'm not a map maker or someone that really did geography as well, but maybe you could discern things. But yeah, it feels like you'd be better off with some sort of geology degree rather than a cartography degree.
And then for the skill that you can use with it is survival naturally, and it says that it's easier to find paths to civilization or to avoid being lost, etc., etc. Yeah, these are good pointers, but I think this goes a little bit back to my issue with 5.D, which is that it still leaves a lot up to the DM and what the DM will allow and the imagination of the player. And it's still nice, it's still something, but it's definitely not good enough. Not good enough for me. And you can craft a map, naturally.
Oh, yes, of course. That would be really awkward if you couldn't.
5.5e just takes a little bit of this. So, for example, now your utilize action is drafting a map of a small area, but then the only thing you can craft, like, because in 5.5e you have, for every tool, you have your utilize action and then a list of items you can craft with it. And usually all of them have a list of number of things you can craft. For the cartographer's tools, you have utilize action, which is draft a map of small area, and then craft, which is basically the same thing, which is you can make a map. You can make a map. It's like the exact same thing, just twice, which is very funny to me.
I feel like you could just draw anything. So it could be like a sketch of somebody, or like, you can good instructions or something like that, directions to a place. Like it feels like it feels so singular just to give it like, oh, and a map. And you're like, okay, but can you do anything else? Like, I don't know, like give more information in, like I'm thinking of, like, I know this sounds really weird, IKEA instructions, how they are just, they're so simple, right? But you can follow like a simple directive map or creating something because they've drawn it in such a way. That's the only thing I could think of, was like using that drawing skill to go through a whole lot of things, and like drawing landmarks and go here, and treasure maps, for example, that sort of thing. Like it's all sort of hidden a little bit. So
yeah, and one of the things in Xanathar's, because Xanathar lists actual like DCs for a couple things you can do for every tool after the like long text that you read. But basically one of the things it says that you can, quote, fill in a part of a map, DC 20, and no more info on that. I'm like,
ooh, that's
any map of a place I haven't been to still, is that DC 20? Is that the same DC of like filling in a map of a place I grew up in?
That's
it's just definitely something that the DM would probably need to modify a little,
for sure,
depending on the context.
But then it makes me think of, there's like the Keys to the Golden Vault, which is that anthology about heists and stuff, and they have loads of different maps in there, a lot of them which have been like drawn on napkins and stuff like that, and they don't have all that information. But I like that idea. If you go, hey, can I study this map and like see if there's anything that would be missing, like, and like you said, have checks for him, but like, okay, there's a big gap here, I think there's some sort of room here, or there's something here, and maybe able to mark out special features for like internal blueprints. I think using that something, because I love that idea of being able to fill in the map, but you need more context. Is it a blueprint of an area? Maybe you're like, okay, what kind of this sort of structure have I ever been in a I don't know, a bank vault before? Well, they probably have security cameras. Where would the security cameras be? And like just being able to process that information,
Still, though, I think like the one thing I want to reiterate, that it's like it's better than nothing. Like these are some of these are silly and they're a stretch and they're reaching a bit.
But like, I love that there's point.
Some like absolutely. And then Dumpstat jumped off of it and then did a bunch more better stuff. So yeah, basically the first thing you read when you check the PDF is that you don't need to check to craft a map at all. It might take a longer time, but no check, you just kind of do it. They explained what their thought process was. You can go read the blog. And you should. They're actually really funny and interesting to read.
And to second this as well, like the PDFs and stuff, that they give you all the sort of technical know-how about like how you would apply it in the game. But actually the thought process, the design stuff around each of the blogs actually is really, it's accessible, a really good takeaway. It's very interesting to understand what they were thinking about. So yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Dumpstat basically, again, all of the Dumpstat PDFs are very extensive. And for example, there's a chart of like map sizes and how long it would take for like different like a whole, like making a map of the whole kingdom, how long that would take and what the area of that would be, etc., etc. They have actions that you can do with them. For example, like it does tell you that you can like better guide people through wilderness, mountains, other environments, whatever. Still, that's a little bit vague, I think. Still very much up to the player and the DM to figure that out. But that's fine. They can figure it out. Like very much like not everything here has to be perfectly written. Like my issue with how vague 5e is that all it is a little bit of flavor. Yeah. A little bit of like the entire thing is left up to the imagination and the discretion of the DM and the player. So whatever. That's fine. You can also like help the navigator, aka whoever's the person doing survival checks. You can give them advantage. You can. I'm not going to go into it too much because a lot of this is like, it's good stuff, but it's not that interesting to discuss.
It just gives that support to people, as you were saying. It's just like, make a map of an area, but well, how big is it? Well, a big map's going to take you X amount of days or whatever an hours, and what time do you have to? And like, I think it just, again, it narrows the options down from infinite to like a couple. Then the players can go, so I would like to do this if I've got time and then make checks and stuff like that. And that's the key thing. It's just getting people to look at those tools and go, I guess I could add proficiency to one check. It's like, but if I do this, it's like, be prepared. You know, that sort of like Boy Scouts sort of thing, like, well, I can get these things in advance and I'll do that in my downtime.
Yeah. Speaking of infinite, they also acknowledge planar travel outside of the material. And again, this goes back to like learning throughout the campaign that I talked about. But basically, they said that your cartographer's tool skills aren't going to be available to you outside of the material plane, but with time, with like as the more you spend time in a certain plane, you can get used to how it works and gain those skills, unless I misunderstood what they wrote, but you can spend time and gain those skills back with time.
I love that idea. I love the idea of finding like an astral plane, like part of the map there, or the ethereal plane. Like I love that idea, that the possibility of finding something like that could be a really worthwhile treasure. If you're doing like a Spelljammer campaign or anything like that, that could be really, I'd never thought about that. That's really cool.
So what's your next one?
So the next one, which I appreciate, I've already butchered the name of a little bit, but the Gemologist tool supplies. So this I found really interesting, because obviously a lot of treasure we get in D&D is often like, you get 10, 25 gold GP's worth of gems, and you go, cool, so 250 gold coins, you know, like it's selling the stuff, like, and most people go, well, we want a diamond for XYZ, and people tend to now, there's a little bit of like people being pedantic about like spell components and stuff like that, but often gems, they're just sort of like, we use them for trading money and stuff like that. It's like it's just stuff. It's just stuff. And I think there's also like a Baldur's Gate thing as well. I just have stuff I wish to sell and I want to get that bit of armor. And it's just, there's no value to it other than like what it is. So in this supplies, in this particular kit, it talks about like, obviously, why gems are important, and that they can have magical properties and they can help you sort of in combat or doing stuff, because we know that in this world, in the real world, a lot of gems and precious stones have meanings. So, you know, like I'm thinking of, you know, protection of forts or family connections, all that sort of thing, that we've put meaning to them, like, you know, birthstones and all that sort of thing, and like how people feel about stuff. So I like that they're using that sort of knowledge. So here in this, it talks about a bit of polishing stones, a bit of enchanting and recharging the powers, because you can find gems, like uncut gems, and mine them in the wild, but they won't have their power. You might have to charge them by putting next to a campfire, for example, or under. It did give an example of like, you know, under the moonlight on a sleeping cat was another way to charge gems.
Oh, really?
Which I thought that was really interesting. Can you imagine? Because I've seen so many videos recently of like people putting socks on their cats until the cat moves. Like how? So can you imagine how many gems you can put on your cat before they move?
Honestly, if anything's gonna like give you healing powers, it's gonna be a sleeping cat next to you, like on your leg or something.
Maybe not physical like healing powers, but your mental well-being goes up through the roof.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got like families of focus, and these include dreams, thoughts, protection, transformation, physical, and other families. It gives an example of like, I think, 5 ones that you could use as an example, but obviously probably encourages you to make your own ones up for each individual gem. The sizes of them, you can go from 100 gold, 100 GP, 250, and 500 gold, and each of them have I was saying this before, like sort of like the initial one is like, say for example, if I go to a tiger's eye, for example, so it gives a description of what tiger's eye is. Shades of brown and black and yellow in layers, providing calm and courage to those facing situations. So it's protection. The requirement is that the wielder must touch a frightened or charmed creature with this gem as a bonus action. At the lowest level, the target can repeat their saving throw against one effect that has them frightened or charmed. At 250, they can repeat their saving throw against one effect that has them frightened and charmed, but then gain a +1 to that saving throw. And at 500, they repeat the saving throw, gain a +2. And it talks about like how you would increase the size, like how would you make it more valuable, also think for selling. But I had that thought about like, wait, what if you had a collection of gems just at the bottom of your bag and go, sod it, I will put them on the sleeping cat. And then everyone has one gem that could help them with, like, say, with frightened, with protection from sort of like dreams, that you get an extra hit points or something like that. So I just thought it was just really interesting that, again, it's just giving you something a little extra maybe in combat, maybe outside of combat, but just as a way of a protection thing or just just something like, again, you were talking about it before, this sort of mechanical stuff. What you have to charge them every day for 8 hours, and they will lose their charge after a little while. Like batteries. So I just thought it was just really interesting and different. That's something I hadn't considered before. Because often I was just like, right, sell these ones except for the diamond.
It just makes adding mechanical values to things like that just makes me feel. It just makes the world that these games are set in feel bigger to me.
Yeah,
it's sort of like, oh God, I don't no idea if this analogy is gonna make any sense to anybody but me, but. You've got the old GTA games where stores are like a drawing on the wall that you can't actually go into. And then you get later ones where it's like open world and you can go into the stores and there's things that you can, whatever, right? So it's like when you give mechanical value to these things, it's like turning the drawing on a wall into an actual store that you can go into.
It makes it worthwhile considering, having that sit down going, oh, should we just sell it? So go, oh, well, no, we now have, everyone has a magic thing that they can use to protect themselves, and also what I liked about it is that none of you, obviously you have the supplies, that's fine, but none of you have to be magical to use it. You don't, you could just be like, this stone is inherently something that's about protection or for forts or anything like that. Put it on the sleeping cat, obviously, why not? And then anyone can use it.
I wonder how you would make a sending stone. Does it say?
It has a variant rule for iron stones, which I will read out. And they're usually a lot more expensive. They are 1,000 or 5,000 gold pieces and have been worked with gems, teaching the gemstone to gain energy from its wielder by having the gemstone require attunement. I think because iron stones they're incredibly rare. They're sort of like that sort of not luck stones. They're like something to do with intelligence and stuff. That's the only thing I'd say is that it requires people at the beginning to have some sort of intelligence to sort of clean them and stuff like that. But yeah, I liked your analogy of it feels somebody goes, oh, well, I have all this stuff, and we can actually have a discussion about what is worthwhile. We're about to go face a dragon. Well, maybe everyone should have a stone that, they go, oh, no, it's not so scary anymore. I'm not charmed by them anymore. Go to the Feywild.
Maybe a stone that gives you, advantage on Constitution saving throws or
exactly.
something.
So, yeah, if anything, like I said, there's only a couple of precious gemstones in this particular example. But it made me think, oh, wow, but there's so, when you roll for stuff, you go instantly, you get rubies, you get emeralds, you get all a bunch of stuff. What could they do? So, yeah, and I just thought it was really interesting. And it's something that I would, as a player, would love something like this to just have that little bonus of something.
I think the last kit that we have is the forgery kit on my side.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the ones that comes in... that is used most often, I guess, which doesn't say a lot because besides thieves' tools, really, maybe disguise kit as well, really they're not used very often, but forgery kit is one of the other ones, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right. I feel like forgery kit, disguise kit, and thieves' tools are up there. Herbalism kit is the only one I would think of, and poisonous kit, but even then, I feel like there's something about deceiving people want, rather than because they're like, oh, well, I could just buy a health potion, even though the herbalism kit can do stuff. So I agree. I think those are the sort of top three that you mentioned. So well,
the herbalism kit can actually help you make a healer's potion now.
Mm-hmm. Now it can.
2024 with the 2024 handbook. I haven't read through what Dumpstat has for the herbalism kit.
No, me neither.
So for forgery kit, the kits themselves had a bit more, they had individual paragraphs rather than the artisan's tools, which all had one general paragraph for all of them. So the forgery kit in 5e, so the 2014 handbook, just had information on what items the kit actually includes, like papers, parchments, types of inks, wax, whatever, other supplies, and it tells you that obviously you get proficiency on any sort of forgery checks or whatever. That's basically it for that. Obviously, Xanathar's then expands on that a little bit. You've got the same sort of skill, whatever, reaching a little bit things. Though this one did feel a little bit better than the other ones. So, for example, with Arcana, you can check if a magic item is real or fake.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. And with history, you can get better at creating fake historical documents or telling if an old document is fake. And I think that totally makes sense. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, really like that. Yeah.
With investigation, it gets a little bit repetitive. It says that you can tell how an object was made and if it's genuine. It just is sort of, I guess, not really repetitive. It's just more of being able to tell if an item is real or not. And then, this was really interesting. You can, so it says, Xanathar's guide says that you can combine Forger Kit and other tools to get better at forging certain types of things. So
Ooh.
the example it brings is cartographer's tools. If you have proficiency with both, you're going to get way better at making a fake map, which makes total sense.
I love that. That's really cool, actually. Yeah, actually combining stuff to create, like, there's sort of unique, again, I go back to that Minecraft sort of thing, go, wait, if I use these things, I can get something very specific. I really like that. That's really cool.
And maybe you don't have the cartographer's tools proficiency, but your friend does, and you can work on it together, you know? That's mostly it for what Xanathar's guide had. 5.5e, again, takes up, like, just some of that.
I do think this is a bit of a shame, actually, what it says here for the forgery kit. So it says utilize, mimic 10 or fewer words of someone else's handwriting, DC 15, DC 20. I wonder if people are just like, maybe have abused this power and created like whole letters and documents or something like that, because that's what I would use a forgery kit for. I would have it so it takes a lot of time, but 10 or fewer words, that feels a bit.
So what this is, so you remember how I said the Xanathar's guide at the end of the actual text paragraphs, it has like a list of list of actions you can do with each kit. So mimic handwriting and duplicate wax seal are the two actions you can do with Forger Kit in Xanathar's guide. So it seems like what 5.5e did for a lot of those is just take whatever the actions that were there instead of taking anything from the actual like paragraphs of text, which is a shame, because I think checking if a magic item is real or fake, or checking being better at historical document stuff is really cool, but then that would need you to like really like expand on things and format things in a way that they weren't doing for that section. And people can always go back and like use Xanathar's guide. Like 5.5 V is still compatible with Xanathar's guide.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point, because you're checking the authenticity of documents and stuff, but then you could be like, wait, this document has been altered, but then again, like you said, like maybe pairing it with calligrapher's tools, that they'd be like, wait, you can tell it's been altered, but maybe you don't know how long ago it's been altered, has it been restored, all that sort of thing. So yeah, I like that idea. It brings forward oops all sort of art historians, like I like that idea. Oops all like art collectors. That could be quite a fun, interesting thing that they use this forgery kit for. Yeah. Really cool idea.
And then you combine it with glassblower's tools and you can tell if the glass object indeed did or didn't hold a rose in it in the last 24 hours.
Proper Poirot stuff, Miss Marple stuff, Now
what Dumpstat does, there's difficulties of forgeries you can do, like simple, difficult, and complicated, and those all take different amounts of time. There's examples of things you can do. So just pretty basic stuff, but like good stuff.
Yeah.
And has info on like the DC for like checking if it's real or not for other people, and like extra materials that you can get and stuff. So pretty simple stuff, nothing like groundbreaking that we can like sit here and discuss about, but it's good stuff. It really adds to, again, just the usefulness of it, which is like the title of all of their blog posts, just making tools useful.
The quality of something that you make then determines the difficulty of people seeing it through, like, because you could have a really good roll and then it's a very high DC and then only one of the guards spots it or something like that. Like, again, I do like that, because again, it's, as you said, adding that mechanical flavor a little bit, because then there's a chance of risk that it won't work. So I can imagine people going, oh, I use my forgery kit, and you go, okay, do one roll, and you go, cool, it's a 15. You're like, well, I don't know. Maybe, yes, I guess. Like, I feel like it just gives that extra flavor to it, and people get invested as a result. They've created this, like, if it's a forging of papers, they've created a whole like passport and an individual, like, maybe to give to their other player that's infiltrating some sort of thieves guild or something like that. So I like that.
Yeah, one time I used a forgery kit was when I was playing a prison break campaign, and there was like mail you can get in the prison, and I opened somebody else's mail, and then I had to like reseal it and stuff. And I was able to use the forgery kit for that, and I did that a couple of times, and it felt really good. It felt like, oh yes, I finally, like, I used this kit properly for good.
Feels like you've done something incredibly smart, which I know sounds, that's not like a thing of like, oh, you've pooped, but it just feels like, oh my God, what a cool thing you've done.
Right.
And the guards wouldn't necessarily think, oh, they've got mail. Like, yeah, really cool. I really like that as well.
Thank you. And another thing that Dumpstat did is similar to making a map. You don't need a check to make any of these forgeries. It just depends on like the difficulty changes of like how much time it takes to do this.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the focus on like making it is, yeah, the amount of time you spend is equal to, yeah, the quality of it. I really like that. That's really, yeah, so yeah, it's not just like you've rolled really poorly and you've wasted an action as a result. It's like, no, you've spent the time, so now you get a reward for it. Yeah. Really, really cool. My final one is fishing. Now, I know it sounds really wild when we've got, like, you know, corpse stitching, you know, and then stuff about gems, and I've gone fishing. But the reason is every single game I've played recently, like video game or otherwise, there's fishing involved, and people just love fishing. I don't get it myself personally, but what I appreciate about it is that, again, I said it at the beginning, the detail that goes into like getting fish, like getting the checks. What if you're trying to get like lure out like a big monster in the lake, and it is like different lures, there's different rods, etc. that you can really piece together and create your own stuff for it. And at the end, it talks about these different fish statistics. So again, you can apply to anything. Again, you can always make your own. But there's like, you know, stuff like dire sharks you can get and how long it takes to lure them, like 1d10 hours. So again, a proper downtime activity in that sort of sense. One of my favourite ones was this lure called the trapped lure. And I'll read it out to you. It is a lure that has one long hook with multiple smaller hooks of different sizes around it. Each of these tiny hooks are baited with small pieces of worm or meat and designed to hook tiny fish. And once the tiny fish are hooked, they then act as a bait for larger fish to get hooked onto the bigger hooks, and would then act as a larger bait for the truly massive fish that gets hooked. So it's like fish within a fish within a fish. That's sort of like, you can have a whole, and I like that idea of just like getting just getting more fish for your buck in that sort of sense.
Yeah.
Like you're doing so much more as a result. So I just thought that was just a really interesting thing, because again, otherwise I'm like, I'll just stay here until I've got free fish. But what if you like, I could spend 6 hours, but then I get 5 fish and they're all different sizes and and everyone gets one fish, you know, that sort of thing.
I'm making a campaign right now where one recurring NPC that's going to be there is this guy that like sails the TCs on like this tiny little 1 person, like 2%, whatever, what's it called? Boat, little.
What, like a rowboat?
Yeah. So he like sails the seas on like this tiny little rowboat. It's actually secretly bigger on the inside, but he like has a front of like selling fish in the middle of the ocean. It's like,
I like it.
I can go fish my own fish, my guy, but it really secretly is like selling magic items inside the boat. But anyway.
Oh, cool. So having the magic items inside the fish? Or
no, inside the boat. Like it's like bigger on the inside. There's like a little hatch, and you can go down it, and it's like
cool. I do like the idea that people come in and they just get like a big massive like salmon. It's like, oh, what did you get? You got nothing, and it's just the wrapping that you have for the magic items that I think you just described. I mean, they all smell of fish guts, but you know they're protected and no one will steal them. Yeah, and
you can't cut the fish open. You have to wait for the fish to poop it out or something.
Oh god, yeah, you have to again squeezing and just. All the horrible stuff. But yeah, it's true. Like, again, I don't tend to think of, you know, when you go shopping, you're like, oh yeah, magic items. You go with this. What about just food? What about like, yeah, what if you were, again, combining with the other tools you talk about, obviously there's cook utensils and stuff like that. What if you were trying to prepare a nice meal and you're like, or something, maybe getting components for like a hero's feast. Maybe if you're trying to get like, oh, what kind of bits can we bring, like make it fresher or some way? And then combine that with the fish stuff. Again, maybe it's just like, okay, so you cast a spell Hero's Feast, everyone gets food, but because you use fresh ingredients that aren't magical, you get an extra bonus to it or something like that. So all of it just working together for everyone. And yeah, this whole sort of talk about tools has made me think, I really should look into it more as a GM and like really encourage people to really think like, what is their hobby? What is their thing that they always have with them? And it doesn't have to be thieves' tools or forgery kits or anything like that. It doesn't have to be something that's nefarious, but it could be something like they like to go fishing. Because I know sometimes, I don't know if you're about yourself, but when it comes to sort of downtime activities, I sort of go, I don't know what I want to do that's not training or not like investigating something. Like, what do I do when I'm not on, you know, in quotation marks? That's sort of like, what do I do when I'm not adventuring? Do I read a book? Do I go and do fishing? Do I go and polish my gem collection? Who knows? But it's
make a wooden crown.
Make a wooden crown, absolutely. Yeah, sell on your Etsy store or in the marketplace.
Exactly.
You know? Thank you so much. I really appreciate like going through it with it, and like we've only covered like a small portion of the dump stat stuff. I will say, as of recording, Stephen has put out why he doesn't like the new 2024 rules. And the reason ultimately is that they're not as good as his, because his stuff, as we said, they go into a lot more detail.
Yeah. There's more thought put behind each and every one of them.
Exactly. He also questions why certain things are with certain things. So, that, for example, like the brewer's kit, the brewer's supplies, why would you make antitoxins or something like that? Is it because you drink too much? And so I think, again, is that something going, someone's not thought this through? Guess who has thought this through? Me.
Buy my book.
Yeah. So, but it is a worthwhile, I think, because we talked about it earlier, reading through his blog as well as the PDFs as well, and chucking a few coins to his Patreon. Because it is, I've definitely thought more about it, but actually, tools aren't just the last thing on my mind, but it could be something that's really a part of my character. Like, who was I before I was an adventurer,
Yeah, to me, the artisan tool, if I'm blessed enough that my character gets to have an artisan tool, it's such an important equipment in my list of equipments. It's something that, like, I'm constantly thinking about, how can I use this?
Yeah, it should make you excited to play your character in a different way that's not sort of, I attack, I charm them with magic. It's like, do I make them a wooden little crown, like, as a peace offering,
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about tools. Like, again, is that something people go, really? And I go, yeah, really. It's stuff like this, like the nitty-gritty stuff that actually makes our stories more interesting. Where can we find your stuff? Where are you on the big wider world? Is there anything you'd like to plug or recommend, my friend?
Gosh, okay, so you can follow me on Blue Sky at Shaghik, which is spelled as Shaghik. That's my real name. Woo! I am on there. If I do anything, you'll hear about it on there. Well, maybe, unless you use a pseudonym, then maybe not.
Then you won't hear about it.
I might retweet it, but not say that that's me behind the project or something. Oh my god, I said retweet. No!
Quote tweet.
No, not quote tweet, reskeet. What is it?
Reskeet. Oh, I don't know. It's just requote. Repost, whatever. Yeah.
Whatever, that thing. But yes, currently I'm working at the One Shot Network as an editor, and I'm always looking for more work as an editor. I'm also secretly working on an audio drama with a writing partner, but that's still like we're still writing the scripts, so it's going to be a while. I think we'll probably do casting next year. So, and I'll definitely you'll hear something about that maybe on my Blue Sky. So follow me on there to eventually hear about that. Other than that, I do some actual plays here and there. Mostly on Twitch nowadays, because I don't. But I want to do another podcast again. But my God, I don't want to be the manager and the DM again. Dear Lord, I can't.
Gotta look after yourself. Yeah, no burning out.
I'm not gonna be the project manager and the planner of that all. Other than that, that's basically it. Just follow me on Blue Sky. I'll talk about things there. If I do. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Shaghik. It's been, like I said, I as soon as we had a conversation about TTRPGs on the pub quiz, I was like, there's someone else that does a lot, like knows a lot of stuff and is passionate about stuff. So I wanted to get you on and first talk about. And I'd love to have you back on to talk about Heart and Spire at some point. Because it's one of those things where I think a lot of people have heard about it but don't really know what it is. Or again, they know of Rowan, Rook and Descartes, but I think Heart is one of the beating hearts of Rowan, Rook and Descartes. But I think it'd be nice to have a conversation about that at some point if you're up for it. So
oh my God, I'd love that. I could talk again. Like Heart and D&D are the two games I know best, and I could talk about Heart for hours.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone who's been listening. Very much appreciate it. We'll be back next week with another episode of the DM's Book Club. But until then, goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening.
Goodbye.